Shalom, friends. It's Rabbi Jenny Solomon at Beth Myers Synagogue, here with a mincha moment, a moment of afternoon pause, and hopefully sharing a little bit of wisdom, something that I'm thinking about in my own spiritual life. So we are on the precipice of Rosh Hashanah. Everyone in the Jewish world is abundantly aware that Rosh Hashanah is only days away, the new year. And I've been thinking about the fact that Rosh Hashanah actually goes by a number of names in our tradition. So Rosh Hashanah, of course, is the traditional name, which translates quite literally as the head of the year, the new year. But there are some other names that we use to refer to Rosh Hashanah in our tradition. The first comes from the Torah, Yom Teruah, which means a day of sounding. Whatever this Teruah sound is, it is one of the sounds that is made by the shofar, by the blowing of the ram's horn. So it is a day of sounding, of making this very loud sound, this very specific sound. It is also a Yom HaZikaron. It's a day of remembrance. And if you're interested in understanding a little bit more about what that might mean, I invite you to come to our Rosh Hashanah meditation sit, which will take place on the second day of Rosh Hashanah at 9 in the morning outside. The last way that we refer to Rosh Hashanah is as Yom Hadin, a day of judgment. And if I'm being honest, that's probably my least favorite name for Rosh Hashanah. For sure, some of us, that quality of deen, of judgment, of setting limits, of a willingness to be self-critical. For some of us, that quality of deen is very low. And so in the language of Musar, and Tikkun Hamidot, repairing our ways, there are people who have to work to strengthen and amplify that soul trait. But for most people that I know, and certainly myself, there's an excess of deen, a sort of inner harshness. And so what I feel called to amplify or expand, especially in these days leading up to Rosh Hashanah, is actually the opposite of deen. It's the quality of chesed, of loving kindness, of compassion, of rachamim, of mercy. And in fact, there's a beautiful midrash. Of course, we do not believe that God takes a human form, but there's a beautiful ancient rabbinic story that imagines, kivyachol, not literally, but in a sort of imaginative way, that part of what we're doing on Rosh Hashanah is inviting, and through Yom Kippur, is really inviting God, as if God sat in a chair, to get up from the chair of deen, that chair of judgment, get up from that chair and move over and sit down on a chair, on a throne of chesed, of love and rachamim, mercy. So how do we build in a little bit more kindness into our spiritual practice? There are a couple of ways that I work on this. The first is just noticing when an excess of judgment is arising. So I'll give you an example. I made a mistake, or better said, I did something not as good as I would have wanted to do it in retrospect this past Sunday. And so on my run this morning, I found as I was listening to music and just enjoying my run, that as I watched my mind, I kept coming back to this mistake and back to this thing that I wish I had done better over and over and over and over. So the first step is just noticing when that deen, when that quality of judgment is arising. The second is just to take that awareness and see if we can add a little bit of compassion. Like, yeah, I was doing the best I could under the circumstances. This is incredibly stressful season with lots of balls in the air, lots of demands. And I was being reactive to one particular thing without really being fully responsive to something else. And so there was a kind of misalignment, which I wish I would have done better. But again, can I add a little bit of just kindness and compassion? And then finally, to remember that I am not alone, right? I'm human, just like we're all human, making mistakes, not striving for perfection, but striving for growth. And in order to grow, I am going to make mistakes. And my commitment to myself is, whenever possible, to learn from those mistakes. And it's really hard to miss the mark. It's very disappointing, but it is how we learn and how we grow, or how we best learn and grow. And everyone's doing it. So I can remember that I'm not alone in that. Nobody's perfect. Nobody hits the target every time. And the way that I ended up responding to that moment of missing the mark was really imbued with the kind of integrity that I try to live with, and open-heartedness and graciousness that I try to live with. So I offer that to you if it's helpful, especially as we approach a day which, again, is Yom Hadin. There is, we don't call it the days of awe for no reason. They're filled with awe and trembling, and they should be. We should feel like our lives are on the line, that it's a day in which we can not only experience ourselves as being held accountable, but hold ourselves accountable for the ways in which we didn't meet our highest aspirations in the year that's passed, and the ways in which we want to grow in the year that comes. But again, for many of us, and I include myself in this group, we have a lot of deen already. And so this moment also invites us to turn up the volume on Chesed and Rachamim. And that comes, in my experience, by first noticing when the deen is on top volume, and then seeing if we can add just a little measure of kindness and compassion towards ourselves, maybe to others. And finally, remembering we're not alone. Everybody is going through things. Everybody's missing the mark. Everyone's learning. And there's a comfort and a grace-filled quality to that as well. All right, friends. Shana Tova. Wishing everyone a good new year. Shana Tova umetuka. A year of sweetness. Let's make it sweet together. Shalom. Peace.